Good evening and welcome to Empowered to Live, where faith meets purpose and purpose fuels freedom. I am your host, Andrea Rose Butler, and today we are back with part four of our series, Breaking Up with Limitations. I hope you all have been enjoying this series so far. We've discussed the limitations of procrastination, and I hope that you have let it go and that you are working on, you know, getting over that and working through that, limitation or procrastination. We also talked about letting go of things that no longer serve us, those limiting beliefs that we have, or our patterns, or things that we've done in the past, or people that no longer serve us, or actions that no longer serve us that we need to let go of. And then last week we talked about reigniting our creative passions. Sometimes we let the voices of others or ourselves, or we talked about being in survival mode, or responsibilities that held us back. So we put aside the creative part of us, the things that fuels our soul and brings healing to us. And this week we're going to take an honest look inward, and we're going to talk about mental health and what it means to let go of old thought patterns, again, that no longer serve us. So these are things that, we're letting go of things that they can't go with us, where God is taking us. We can't go into the new season where we're going in our lives. We are someone, we're growing up and we're glowing up, but we've got stuff that hold us down, and so we never really fully embrace or step into the things that are the places and the things that we need to walk in and step into because of limitations that we have placed on ourselves, or maybe you've got the voice of others that have spoken into your life, and maybe just life itself has been what has limited you. And so we've been breaking them up. We've been writing those Dear John letters, Dear Jane letters, and we've been letting them know, that I heard the song, you don't own me, you know. And so these things can't own us anymore. And so we're letting them know, we're serving notice that they no longer own us because they no longer serve us. They're nothing, we can't keep going with them. They can't get us where we're going. And so we've got to unpack that luggage. It's like going on a vacation and you're going to the tropics, but you've packed your parker and you've got winter boots and winter hats. They don't go together. You should be in shorts and t-shirts and tank tops and all those different things, and but you packed and you're carrying stuff for an old season that is not a part of the season that you're in. It's not a part of the journey that you're in right now, and so we've got to let them go, and we need to be able to walk into the new lives, letting stuff go, lightening our luggage. You go to the airport and you put it on that scale, and they're like, you're overweight. And, so you either have to pay the price to carry the stuff that you probably don't need on this trip, or you can take stuff out of that suitcase and give it to somebody else to take it back home because you don't need it. Like you got that winter coat and you're going to the tropics. That coat's taking up space and it's adding weight to you, so you've got to get rid of it. And it's because it no longer is serving you, and so we've got to let that go. So we're going to talk about that today. Romans 12:2 says that do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So our minds got to be renewed in order for us to, all the things that we've talked about over the past 3 weeks comes from our thoughts, our minds being renewed. When we let go of procrastination, procrastination is a form of fear. Letting go of the things that no longer serve us, again, stems sometimes from fear. Not allowing our creativity to flow also flows probably from a space of fear, fear of failure, sometimes fear of success. But it all has that root in fear. And so we're going to let go of those old patterns, but we're going to renew our minds, our thought patterns. And did a whole series on mindset. So if you go to a YouTube channel, and you can find that there. And so we want to let go of these different things that are no longer a part of who we are. And we need to let them go so that we can fully embrace the new season that we are coming in. We are in the last half of 2025. And as we, October, I can't believe October's almost over. It seems like it just got here. And we've got like 2 more weeks and a few days left in this month. And I was just like, wow, why? How did this month go by, so far, so fast? We've only got, we are in what, the fourth week of October. And so, yeah, so we don't have much time left in this month, and then we'll be in November very quickly. And so, we've got to let go of that, of that time that we have. And so, time is going very fast for us. Before we look up, it's going to be the new year. And we don't want to go into this new year carrying stuff that no longer serve us, old patterns, old thoughts that are no longer a part of who we are and the new season that we're going into. So 2026 has got to see a difference in us. And 2026 definitely is going to see a new me. And so I've been growing and making some changes and some transitions in 2025 that, coming into the year of 2026 is the Lord, as we say in Jamaica, the Lord spare my life and allow me to see 2026. There are some things that are going to be done differently along with this podcast. If you're following me on Instagram and on social, on Facebook and other social, LinkedIn, all of those places, you're going to see some changes in 2026. So some of the things that I was doing in 25 that I've learned and grown, even with this podcast, I've grown in the year plus that we, almost a year and a half now. Come December will be a year and a half that this podcast has been here. And so in 2026, we're rolling into our year two, and I am just super excited about the growth that has taken place on this podcast. And because some of that growth came because of me putting aside procrastination, letting go of things that no longer serve me, reigniting my creativity, and now and breaking some old patterns, some old thought patterns, from my past. Like I said, if those of you have been following me for a while, you have, follow me on Facebook and different things like that, that I grew up in a in an abusive home, married an abuser. And so there were things, those traumas in my life caused me to have thought patterns and behaviors, in particular fear, that that held me back for so long. And I talked about last week about then that creativity space where I was asked to write curriculum that I didn't know that I could write. No one had ever pushed me to that degree, and me in that moment said, I'm going to do this and do it afraid. And how that was a catalyst to bring me to the place that I am today, and the growth that I've seen in my life as in my latter years. And I look to that scripture that says, and my latter years will be greater than my former years. And I truly believe that, because I'm already seeing it. The boldness that I am working on, that that I've gotten better. I'm always praying for boldness. And this podcast, doing this week after week, is giving me that boldness to begin to speak in a way that I never could, because I was afraid. I'm being honest. This is about inspiration and empowerment, and because I was fearful about the reception, my own perception and reception of how this was going to come across, I was stuck. And so, when we have these moments, it keeps us stuck. And so again, we're talking about old patterns, about mental health. It's not just about avoiding a breakdown. And people always think, mental health means you're crazy. But your mental health is your peace. Your mental health is about your joy. It's about how you see yourself, how you think the world sees you. That's all because it's all about our thoughts, because it's in our mind. So that's mental. And so when we have healthy mental thoughts and feelings about ourselves and the world and the space that we occupy, that is healthy. So it's not, again, just about not having a nervous breakdown or having anxiety or panic attacks, and all of those things are real and we need to address those. But it's more than that, and it's about going deeper and looking at sometimes the patterns that we have, the behaviors that we have. um, because I was sexually assaulted, I self-sabotage, especially when it comes to my weight. And that was something that I learned, through a therapist. And she was like, you're self-sabotaging yourself. I would get to be a certain weight and somebody would start noticing, people start noticing, saying stuff. And then I find myself not wanting to exercise, not eating right. And I find myself going back into that space of fear that, I've got to protect myself because nobody says nice things when you're bigger. But it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy mentally. It's unhealthy physically to do that to yourself. And so I recognized that pattern, and I've gotten better at that, getting better of saying not everybody is out to hurt you. And so therefore, I can be who I am. I can be healthy. I can look good to myself. And if somebody compliments, thank you, keep it moving and not be afraid. So those are some of the things that we look at as patterns of behavior and recognizing those. And like I said, it's about being transformed by the renewing of our mind. So that old thought pattern that not everybody is out to hurt you, not everybody means you, bad. And so we don't self-sabotage ourselves, our progress, the growth that we have, our careers, our lives, our families, different things like that. So how can we break that cycle of negative self-talk, people pleasing, the cycle of fear that shape our lives? And with God's help, we can do that. And I know it was through Him that He helped me to get to the place that I'm in today, the space that I'm in today, of growing and recognizing that He is for me. And because He's for me, it doesn't matter what the enemy does. It doesn't matter, what happens in and around me. It's not about that. It's about, God, what are you doing? How do you see me? How do you see my life being played out, and allowing Him to take care of me and the negative thoughts that I've had in my mind. So how do we break those cycles? How do we get rid of those patterns, those things that no longer serve us, and carry on? So again, we need to reset our mental health. We need to reset our mindset. How do we do that? So identify the pattern. Like I said, for me, self-sabotage was something that I learned that I was doing. And I was just like, how do I end up in this cycle again? And when she said that, and I was just like, I don't do that. And she was like, think about what you do. And I was like, I do that. And I had to start thinking about that. It's a scary place, when you're starting to get healed in your mind and in your life. It's a scary place to want to take those steps, and to grow. And it's intimidating, to say the least, to be able to identify those patterns and do it, so um, unafraid, which again, it's a scary place, to be in that space, to be in that place where you are afraid. And so identify it, write them down, Again, you know me. I always talk about that. You're gonna be able to write them down, because I think sometimes when we write them down, we put pen to paper and we begin to write down, identify some of the things that you see yourself doing in whatever area it is, whether it's people pleasing, like why do you do it? When you find yourself saying yes when you rather say no, that whole series about boundaries, and that's come up a lot. When we set those boundaries and then we allow people to encroach on our boundaries and they keep pushing in, pushing in, and pushing in, and finally we've eroded all of our boundaries. And you sometimes learning no is a complete sentence and be okay with that no being a complete sentence. Challenge the line. What have you told yourself that is a lie, that is not truth for you, on your circumstances? Like I shared last week, somebody says, that's childish, and we believe them. Or, they said, you're too old for that. Or who told you you could write? Who told you you could sing? Who told you you could do whatever? Fill in the blank. Um, Challenge it. Why? What? Why did they say what they said? Who is this person to you? I was thinking about that and I was like, does this person pay my rent? Do I need them for support? Why listen to what they tell me? Why am I listening to what they have to say? They don't know me. They're not God. They didn't create me, so they don't know um, what gifting I have. And so that the limitation that I've allowed, them to put on my life by listening to what they said to me, about me, or all of those things, um, you've got to let it go. Challenge the lie. If somebody says, well, you're too whatever, you know, examine it. Who is this person? You know, why did they say what they say? You know, Sometimes people who are bitter because of their choices will sometimes try to poison your well because of the fact that their well was poisoned, or they allow their well to dry up and they don't see a way. They may feel that they're too old or too whatever to fulfill the dream that they have, and so they continue to poison the well, and they begin to speak negatively about you, about your situation, or whatever it is. And so we can't allow that to happen. So challenge the lie of what somebody has said to you, and then seek support. It's always about getting help. Whether it's a trusted friend, somebody that that will speak life into you. And sometimes we need an outside voice to come in and speak to us and speak true to us, and that will really quench the darts and allow us to be a disruptor of our thought patterns. We need somebody to come in and say, well, just like that God did. He said, who told you you were naked? And they had to think about that. Well, the serpent did. Well, we know he's a liar. So if he told you that you were naked, was that true? And so we got to look at who told you that. Who told you XYZ. Again, look at there. What is their motive? And so you need somebody that comes in, and they can speak and ask that question for you that you may be afraid to ask on your own, and help you to see what it is that you're believing. Again, whether it's a trusted friend, a counselor, somebody to hold you accountable. If you need help, you reach out to me. Send me a message and say, I need help. With disrupting my old patterns, and I don't know how to break free. I'm not a counselor. I am a coach, a life purpose coach, but I'm not a counselor. And so depending on the level of the hurt or the that's there, you may need professional help. And then sometimes, again, it could be pastoral care, or it could be a life coach, a trusted friend, somebody that is not going to cause more harm, and that's what you want. You don't want somebody else is going to speak negativity into you on top of the negativity that you already experienced. You want somebody that's going to speak life and speak hope into you to help you renew your thoughts, renew your mind, renew, all of those different things, and be able to be transformed and then support you in that transformation. I tell you, my girls are my hype people. Sometimes they say stuff that's mean, but for the most part, they hype me up. And it was like, oh, look at you, you've got to do that. Oh wow, I like that. And so they're the ones that that when I'm sometimes when my old patterns want to creep in. I you're going to be able to vocalize some of those things that's in there, and don't shame and stuff. It grows and it festers in the darkness, and sometimes you need to bring it to the light. And sometimes I go to them, or I reach out to we just started a group of women in ministry and leadership, where we've come in together, and where this is kind of our safe space to be able to say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And when we begin to share, and sometimes when somebody shares and you're like, oh my God, I had that same experience. And it's encouraging, it's motivating to one, let you know that you're not alone. And so a lot of times, sometimes we go through things and we feel that we're alone, and we're not. Our thoughts that we have, somebody else is experiencing maybe not the same thought, but they're experiencing some form of negative self-talk, or they're living in a way that's not always positive. Maybe they're not very people pleasing, but maybe they're disruptors because of pain. And so they're exhibiting it in a different way than you are. But all of us have things that, in our lives that we want to get rid of, and old patterns that we have, whether or not we're self-sabotaging or whatever it is. We all have those. So when we have those, so challenge time? We got a weekly challenge, always a weekly challenge. What's an unhealthy pattern that you need to release this season? Where we're coming up on the end of the year, so we need to let it go by the end of this year, so that in 2026 you can walk and embrace in the new season with a new you. And so, what is an unhealthy pattern that you need to release this season, and what truth will you replace it with? So, whatever that old pattern, whatever the lie you have been believing, let's find the truth. Again, when you seek that support and have that accountability, and you can sit down with somebody, especially somebody that knows you well and can see you beyond what you can see, because sometimes we feel that we're not as good as we think we are, and people see us better than we can see ourselves. So let's talk about that. So that challenge time is to look for that unhealthy pattern, write it down, and bring it to the light, and then find a truth that you can replace it with. We have AI. AI is wonderful in helping with that. So you can put in, whether Chat GPT or Gemini or whatever the software is out there that, artificial intelligence, go out there and say, this is an old pattern. This is a pattern that I have. And how do I break this pattern? And it will go through for you, and it will give you steps, so things that you can do, that you can use to break out those patterns. So I just want to encourage you to do that. Again, as we're coming up on the end of the year, make sure that you are letting go of these, you're breaking up with these limitations that have been holding you back. And so remember, mental health is an integral part of our well-being, including our spiritual health. And as you break old cycles, you make space for God's renewal. And next week, we'll close out our series. And we're talking about digital detox. I tell you, these digital things can hold us hostage a lot. So if you are one of those people that are love to dead scroll on social media or whatever, you're on your phone a lot, or even on your computer. I find myself sometimes I'm always writing, and I need to sometimes my kids are like, "Are you still up? I thought you went to bed." No, I was laying down, but then a thought came to mind, and then I'm up for hours, and so sometimes we've got to learn how to step away, and put our phones, and so how do we detox from that to reset our relationship with technology and connect with people, and that's important too for us to break up with technology, and give space for creativity. See what I did there? So we're going to talk about that next week. So again, thank you all for joining me for another episode of Empowered to Live. And remember, we'll continue to walk in faith and live in freedom. Have a wonderful night and a great weekend. Thank you all for joining me. Bye.